Welcome to Unexpected Points. This is Kevin Cole. I am your host. I am joined this week by Benjamin Solak. Benjamin is a writer with the Draft Network. He is a deputy editor at Bleeding Green. He knows everything about the Eagles. He's going through a glass case of emotion this week, I would say, for everything that's going on with Doug Pederson being let go. So I want to have him on to discuss everything Eagles and then also discuss everything that's going on with the divisional round. So, Ben, thanks for joining me.
No, thanks for having me on. Yeah, it was like standing at the bottom of a mountain and just kind of watching the avalanche come. Like, all right, this is gonna hit me. Here we go. And it's hitting me. This is great. I love it. Buried in snow. This is awesome.
Yeah, it went pretty quickly from job is safe to week 17 controversy to hints of the fact that they could move on. And once you saw that, you kind of knew at that point it was going to happen, right?
Yeah, there was smoke for a bit. And when the Eagles decide to do something, they think they get clever by leaking stuff, but we kind of have caught the game a little bit. And so when all of a sudden you start seeing, oh, Doug's meeting didn't go as well, and there's going to be a second meeting, and Doug's wants a staff that Jeffrey Lurie doesn't want. It's like, all right, well, let's just fire the guy because we're clearly leading up to that, and you don't need to pre-justify it for us. We're not going to fall for this bait a little bit, It's very clear, right? Like Lurie brought up in his presser after the firing that there was a difference in vision, and that was the main thing. Difference in vision as to how the coaching staffs need to be filled, and if the team needs to be oriented on winning now in 2021 versus winning later, and kind of that life cycle of a team. It's all about a difference in vision. We think Doug Pederson's a great head coach, et cetera, which simply is to say Pederson thought that the team needs to go a certain way. He doesn't have the amount of power that he wanted to have in that system, in that Eagles office, in that building. He didn't have the power he wanted to have. And that's why you get the Rappaport tweet, which is talking to people close to Pederson after he's been fired. He just doesn't want people telling him what to do anymore. And for anything you think about Doug, the way he makes decisions, the way he plays his players, good coach, bad coach, you can't really fault the head coach for saying, I'm not being treated like a head coach. I don't want to be in this position any longer. Let me go somewhere else where I'm going to get, treated with big boys, like an adult, which is understandable.
Yeah, I mean, say or not, I think the immediate reaction now that this has become a vacancy and ranking the different vacancies that are available, a lot of people are putting the Eagles down near the bottom. So obviously there's issues with control, and I think you spoke well to that. But even looking forward at the talent on the roster, the age of the roster, the quarterback uncertainty, the cap situation, did he want to coach this team next year? I mean, you don't want to be fired, obviously. Right. You want to see things through. You want to show that you can overcome a poor season, right? But his contract goes through 2022. He's a hot coaching candidate. Maybe he'll jump right back in. Maybe he won't. Maybe he'll take a year off. I doubt it, but maybe he'll jump right back in. So this is not the worst possible outcome for Doug Pederson. And he wasn't going to these meetings, at least in my opinion. I doubt he was going to these meetings saying, I want to make sure I'm saying the right thing to make sure I don't get fired.
Yeah, no, my boss at Bleeding Green, when we saw the report, they were like, oh, he wants to bring Matt Burke in as DC or Corey Undlin. He was like, yeah, Doug's trying to get fired. Like, this is 100%. Doug's like, I'm thinking of the worst names, guys who don't make any sense, get me out of here. And of course, after a coach is fired, everybody comes out of the woodwork with sources that they had X years ago, Y years ago about things that they can never get confirmed, because at that point you kind of have momentum. It was shared that, people close to Pederson, hearing how he felt about the job in 2019, a year ago, said, like, you got to, dig your heels in. You got to either say, give me power or let me out of here. You got to draw a line in the sand. And Pederson has always been affable, a bit of a player's coach, a little bit of a patient guy, said, like, oh, no, I'm going to try to work through this and we're going to get this done. And so obviously that's a much easier story to break now versus breaking back then. But like that has some smoke to it, right? That has some run to it. And so I do think if you're Pederson, you have to be careful with the next job you get, because you don't want to be put in a similar position where you're just scrapping for power over your own roster. Pederson never had full impact over the defense. He was the head coach, and the defense was completely run by Schwartz. The degree to which his and his offensive coaching staff had impact on personnel is a matter of great debate, because it seems like every bad pick that's been made, the Eagles coaching staff had a big impact on it, and all the good picks was just all the personnel office, which is very interesting. And then he didn't even have full control over filling out his coaching staff. So you've got to make sure you get that job. But I agree with you. When I flick on Eagles film and I watch passing game concepts, that's modern West Coast offense. That works. That's good stuff. It's successful in other places in the league. And you saw when they hired Rich Scangarello, the ex-Broncos offensive coordinator, the ex-passing game coordinator for the 49ers, and Kyle Shanahan, it was a Roseman hire. And Roseman wanted them to bring in more of this sort of an offense, which isn't exactly congruent with what Pederson was doing. And so they'd have like Pederson play, under center wide zone. Where'd that come from? There's no harmony there. And so you get Pederson in a spot where he can, I think, fully run the offense he wants to run and have a little bit more control over how his staff is filled out. I expect him to put a good offense on the field, whether that's as a coordinator or as a head coach. And again, like that's going to be tough to watch as an Eagles fan.
Yeah, I mean, there has been a trend of you reach your hand into that Shanahan, dust, and you just sprinkle it over the offense, and boom, any quarterback that you have is now functional, if not good, at least by the numbers, no matter how limited that they may be. And yeah, Pederson doesn't really fit into that mold. But let's start from the top. So, number one, what do we know about Doug Pederson as a coach? Because I think this comes up a lot in conversations I've had with people where when we're watching games, at least when I'm watching games. So I'm going to say my level first, and then your levels at a different level.
Sure.
But my level is the easiest things to diagnose are things that all the nerds talk about that we get made fun of for talking about too much, which is, are they going for it on fourth down when they should be going for it? Are they passing enough on early downs? Are they using motion? Are they doing play action? Are they doing these things that are become like these blanket recommendations that the pushback will be, well, it's more nuanced than that. You got to do this and that. So I think Pederson was way out in front in a lot of those things, whether it was him personally or whether it was the front office moving him that way. The rest of the league is kind of caught up in a lot of these different metrics. I was looking at him as far as the amount that he's going for it on fourth downs versus before, and they're way out ahead in 2017 in particular. It's scaled back a little bit there. I looked at the use of play action, which is a little bit different in that offense. I mean, because you're not doing the under center stuff, I don't know how relevant it is, but there was someone where the league has also trended up further and further while the Eagles have stagnated versus the average. So I guess some of these things that we associate with just being like an easy button that you push and that you get your offense better. Maybe he wasn't going as far in that direction, but he had success, and he had success in that 2017 season in particular. So how good of a coach do you think he is from what you've seen, and what do we have to think about the stuff we can't see, the stuff that's going on inside the building, the stuff that comes to preparation, the CEO type of stuff that Pederson is doing?
Right. It's a very good question because, man, that coach titled his book Fearless. And that was a great decision. But then his team started getting bad, and we started to be able to call everything he did fearless, and that did not go well for him, right?
Yeah.
Where,
he was fearless in that meeting with Lurie.
You
about to get
Carson
fired.
Wentz, week 12 after he's been so bad, and it's like, we finally start Jalen Hurts. Who's going to be your starting quarterback? He's like, I have to watch the film. We're all like, oh, fearless. We're just being terrible with it. But right, the initial advantage that he brought was that in-game decision making. I absolutely agree with you. It was that you had him maximizing his offense's opportunities by going for it on fourth down, by playing on third down to set up fourth down. They obviously were wicked good in the red zone and on third down, which has been talked about at length in 2017. You lose some of that coaching staff. We talked about whether or not it was guys that he brought in versus Rosen brought in. You don't have the same congruity Monday to Saturday, and it makes it more difficult to have those maximized decisions on Sunday, right? And so you're not as good on fourth down because you don't feel like your coaching staff and your preparation has gotten you to that point. So that change in 2017, losing DeFilippo and Reich, has an impact there. I do think that Pederson's better as a first creator than a second creator. He's better as a Monday to Saturday game plan installer than he is as a Sunday adjuster. A lot of what he does on the chalkboard is really good. And you like what you see in terms of how he gets his guys into field, and you like how he works with spacing. It's very traditional West Coast. You could certainly get more creative, but it works. It's effective. And then Wentz is bad. Like, Wentz is bad in 2020. He doesn't know where to look. He doesn't know how to get the ball to him. He not comfortable with his progressions, not keying safeties pre-snap. Nothing that you want in a healthy quarterback process is available to him. And there's a question mark here. To what degree Pederson was allowed to change the offense to fix that, because there's a belief in Philadelphia that Wentz dug his heels in and said, this is the offense. This is what I want to run. We're running it. I'm not running anything else. So there's a chance Pederson wanted to do a little alchemy, move this around, play a lot more under center, move him more out of the pocket. And Wentz was obstinate and saying, I'm not going to participate in this. I'm not going to make these changes. I could run this offense. But when Wentz was poor, they came out with largely the same stuff week after week. They really struggled. You wanted to see them just kind of throw stuff at the wall with how bad he was being and say, all right, we're going to start putting 3 guys into the concept instead of 5. And we're going to give you fewer decisions to make, or we're going to roll you out a lot more. And we're going to really take you out of the pocket and let your legs be your own check down, because Wentz doesn't like to get to his check downs. We're going to try some stuff here and we're going to see what is good with you. And we're going to build from there. And they never really committed to that. And so a lot of the frustration that you have with Pederson is that he seems to think the solution to everything is like, all right, well, we're just going to put 5 in the concept and we're going to spacing over here. We're going to run slant flat over there. And you're going to have to make a decision, which half field you're going to read and everything. And you wanted him to step out of that and really kind of take a 50,000 foot view of his offense and say what's working for us and what isn't. That goes to designs. And that also goes to, the fan base is frustrated when he doesn't hand the ball off, when Miles Sanders is running very well. And that offensive line is such a really good run blocking offensive line. And they want him to dedicate to that. So there is a maturation that has to happen there for a relatively young play caller. He only infrequently called plays in Kansas City, and then he started doing it in Philadelphia. There is a maturation there to learning what buttons to press in his system to respond to different issues. Certainly he needs to get stronger there. But I think overall, you're looking at a head coach who we talked about maximizes with his decision-making, with his aggressiveness, who coaches a good offense. He puts guys out in the field, opens people up. The work he did with Jalen Hurts was tremendous over the last 4 weeks in terms of getting him free looks, getting him easy releases, one-on-one coverages. And I do think, in the locker room, very well-liked coach, a very respected, a good players coach, a guy who's an advocate for his players, helped get a lot of young guys into spots where they could be successful, even if it was just for flashes. Guys like your Travis Fulghams, guys like your Boston Scotts, was able to maximize in that way with backup quarterbacks. They were out of the playoffs 2 seasons, 2018, 2019. They weren't making it, and they had late season surges to get there. And to me, that speaks to leadership and that speaks to culture. So I do think you do check boxes as a good head coach. Is he an offensive savant? Probably not, but he does a lot of the stuff that you like. And again, I think in a more healthy power dynamic, he can be successful for a while.
Well, why do you think it is the reaction that we've seen has been, I believe, overwhelmingly on the Pederson side of things? If you're going to look on the other side, now I don't know who's on the other side. I'm not sure who's on the other side. I mean, you could say that Roseman's on the other side. I think that's fair. Is Wentz on the other side? I guess. I don't know. We're hearing he's on the other side. I'm not sure who's over there. But why do you think it's so overwhelming towards him when Carson Wentz, let's say Wentz is on the other side. Carson Wentz was, after that 2017 season, he may have been the most sought-after quarterback in the entire NFL, if you were going to go through and ask all 32 general managers who they wanted. He was young. He played at MVP level. And every year since then, his play has stagnated and then fell off a cliff this year. That 2017 play, as you mentioned, a lot of it was based on pressure. A lot of it was based on these unstable things, converting third downs, how he was able to play there. So there's a Super Bowl, obviously. But can you make the case that the results haven't really been that good to start off with, yet you have this player who was the number 2 overall pick, who's a talented guy that people seem to like, and he's fallen off a cliff? Why are people backing the head coach where this seems like a situation where people would back the player over the head coach, would back ownership over a head coach a lot of times also? What is it about this situation? Is it the Super Bowl factor, or are there more things in the dynamic?
The Super Bowl factor for sure. Pederson's going to be immortalized in Wentz. They got the statue of him outside the stadium, but he's going to be
Nick
a Philly
Foles,
guy.
Nick Foles.
Nick Foles and Doug Pederson, which we affectionately refer to as the statue of players and coaches that Jeffrey Lurie chose Carson Wentz over, right? Which is kind of the going to be the meme moving forward. But you do have the Super Bowl aspect of it. That's absolutely there. The other part, I think that Eagles fans are aware of the fact that they really haven't drafted well in the last few years. And it's funny because Jeffrey Lurie is not. Jeffrey Lurie is like, I think if you look at league averages, we've been league average. And it's like, no, close, not really. Like, I wish, but like maybe it's games started, but that doesn't really count. So they haven't drafted well. And I think there's that, understanding, as well as, the Eagles cap situation is a difficult conversation because Roseman was largely given the green light, spend, be aggressive. We're going to, get as many veterans in here as possible. We're going to win some Super Bowls. Let's go. And so he kind of did what was within his reason to do. The ownership let him kind of get aggressive. But you look at where the Eagles' youth is and where the Eagles' cap situation is, and it's not difficult for the fan base to say, this team's not set up for long-term success. They don't have young players who are going to develop nicely, and they don't have cap room to bring in high-priced free agents. And of course, the responsibility for the long-term health of the roster and the franchise lays on the general manager. Roseman, as we know, maximized a short-term window, but it feels like he's responsible for that. Roseman's now survived 3 head coaching firings, which is more than general managers usually survive. So the longer the Eagles go through these moments where Reed was such a good coach, and then Roseman took over the roster, and Reed's offenses started to get worse, and his team started to fall apart, so he's fired. And they bring in Chip Kelly, and Kelly's good at first, and then that situation starts to devolve, and Kelly takes over, and he gets fired. And they bring in Pederson, and they win a Super Bowl, and then the offense starts to get worse, and then the record starts to fall down. And every time Roseman survives this cycle, Eagles fans lose patience with him. And so I think that Roseman is very much so made out to be the villain. He's made out as the foil to Pederson. He's the one who is in Lurie's ear. He's the one who helped, shackle Pederson at the start. He never had full control. He's always had Roseman filling out his staff, so on and so forth. And then the Wentz thing is just because Wentz was terrible this year, right? Like, Wentz was bad. Like, we all loved Wentz a year ago. Wentz was just atrocious this year, and everybody's fed up with that. Like, he was bad. And obviously, when you have such a likable player, such a fun to root for player as Jalen Hurts sitting behind him, it makes it even more difficult to watch him be bad in week 10, week 11, and week 12. So I think the Wentz thing is just, he was rough this year, and that was upsetting. But Roseman is largely you've seen the long-term health of this team degrade over the last couple of seasons, and that it gets put on Roseman's shoulders probably to an unfair degree, though it is still primarily his responsibility. And so he's made out to be the villain in that case. And then you have Pederson, who's very likable, coached them to the Super Bowl, big balls Doug is what they like to call him. And there he is, just, I wish I had control over my coaching staff. Oh, shucks, let me go be good for the Jets. And that's more easy to root for than rooting for Roseman to turn this thing around.
Yeah. So I guess anti-Roseman sentiment, maybe that's a bigger factor there. And I remember that clip of Doug and the ice cream, the ice cream video that went viral. Like, you gotta love him after that, right? I get that. Now, okay, let's pivot to Roseman for a second here, because what I'll say about him is the drafts have been bad. I don't think there's any question about that, no matter how you want to frame it, or maybe some sort of interesting metrics you can put together that may call it league average, where it certainly hasn't been. But that's a difficult thing for me to weigh too much on, because he's not a scout, right? He's not the super scout. He's not the John Dorsey that you're bringing in there, where I think you probably could put more on the super scout's head who's making these final decisions. Presumably, Roseman is taking more of a collaborative approach to what's going on there, and he has qualified people in the building who are helping him with that. Joe Douglas in the past, who's now moved on. Andrew Berry for a short period of time, who's now moved on and seems to be doing well in Cleveland. So you have people moving out of that building to go elsewhere and at least show a modicum of success. Maybe not too much success when it comes to Joe Douglas, but Becton looks pretty good, and we'll see what happens there going forward. So, but I think if we went in a time machine and we went back to every offseason, specifically before, maybe not this offseason, because people didn't like the Jalen Hurts pick, which may have ended up being one of the best moves that he made. People didn't like, right? And then in 2019, I could probably list out 20 different articles that told you that the Eagles had the deepest, best roster in the NFL going into the 2019 season. I could give you another dozen articles praising the glory of Roseman and how he outwitted and outsmarted the Texans by leapfrogging them to go get Andre Dillard, who now everyone hates, and what a brilliant move that was, right? Sure. And I think there's an element of that in prior off seasons for what he's done too. So if he's putting together this team in the offseason and everyone is saying, and the time in that moment in time is maximizing the chance for the Eagles to win, when things fall apart, how much of that is on Roseman then?
Right, yeah, and that's the very quiet thought that I have that I never vocalize, because you get in trouble. It's not an easy argument to make, right? What it's been for me as a guy with a draft background is, since Roseman took the Eagles front office back under his control in 2016, I just haven't really liked the way they've drafted. I haven't liked the players they've selected. Obviously the Wentz deal, the Wentz trade, and they only have one day 2 pick left, and it's Isaac Seumalo, who was a fine pick, but Barnett at the top of 2017 was a reach for me. I liked Goddard as the player at the top of 2018, but I'm not sure tight end is what you needed there. 2019, when you brought in Andre Dillard for the trade up, to me was a big mistake. Dillard did not have the sort of film that I was looking for. And then 2020 with Jalen Reagor, who again, like I had a late first on Reagor, but not above some of the other guys that were available at that time and who were potentially
one other guy
reach.
in particular.
So you've got, and then you look at Sidney Jones, and you look at Rasul Douglas, and you look at Avonte Maddox. The way they drafted in the secondary has struggled. They've completely neglected linebacker, and it's come back to bite them. So I agree. I think that Roseman's clearly has not drafted well over the last 4 years. To what degree that falls on him, not as a scout, is tricky, because certainly you wish that your top guy had that scouting background so as to make that final decision and feel confident in it. And Roseman's going to take a much more collaborative approach where he relies on assistants. He relies on Joe Douglas, now Andy Weidel, and so on and so forth to assist him. And that muddies the blame game. And everybody wants a nice, neat, and tidy blame game. And that sounds mean, but like Lurie should want it as well. Lurie loves collaborative approaches, but when it's not, the chickens come home to roost and you have to figure out who's responsible for a 4-11-1 season, it'd be nice to know who had the final say on X, Y, and Z. And that's why all of this backdoor, the coaching staff fought for Reagor over Jefferson, and Roseman hired Scangarello, but Schwartz promoted Briner, and Pederson wanted Press Taylor, and like that, it makes it very difficult to sit down and say, these are the people who are responsible for these decisions, and this is why we're going to move on from this guy and keep this guy around. So you wish that there was a neater way to bring this all to a head to Roseman and say, you're responsible for these drafts. You're the general manager. So I always circle back to Roseman spoke at Wharton to Cade Massey in 2017 after the Wentz deal. After
That was an interesting interview. And first of all, I think it was the rationale behind some of the Wentz stuff I didn't quite buy, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, right. He was talking about, where I'm an analytics background, I like to trade down, but when you need a quarterback, you potentially have to trade up. And he said all decisions are bets, right? This was his way. And he said, we put things within the frameworks of bets and the frameworks of risk reward. And that's an important thing for me in terms of understanding what Roseman's done. Because if you're told by ownership, which reading the tea leaves, it's pretty clear that he was, maximize this window, keep this roster together. We just won a Super Bowl. Now I want to win 2. Now I want to win 3. Bring me veterans. I don't have time to develop rookies. Spend my money. Let's win some games while Wentz is on his rookie deal. For Roseman, the expected value of a Deshaun Jackson bet probably isn't that good in a vacuum. But if you're being told, listen, bring me veteran receivers, Deshaun Jackson's a premier field stretcher. If he's healthy, which he wasn't, if he's healthy, it's huge for the team. And you can apply that to Alshon Jeffrey, and you can apply that to Malik Jackson. You can apply that to Darius Slay and Rodney McLeod. And so many of these contracts that the Eagles have signed have been fiscally irresponsible, but they've been long bets meant to push the team over the edge in the event of a playoff run. That didn't come to fruition. And it got put on the head coach because he wasn't able to get that team to playoff contention. Lurie brought up, we were one catch away from the NFC Championship game. Okay, sure. The Alshon Jeffrey drop against the Saints. But the reality is you didn't get there in back-to-back years. You didn't get to the NFC Championship game. So you failed, and that's part of the Pederson firing. But for Roseman, all decisions being bets helps us understand why he's such an aggressive general manager who makes these bold moves, who signs these big contracts, who trades up to get in front of the Texans for Andre Dillard and things of that nature. Sometimes bets go poorly. But that doesn't mean that at the time, like you were saying, the bet was a bad idea relative to the information that we had. And so that's why Roseman remains at the controls, is because the idea is that he's such a nuanced thinker who's willing to take chances that for as quickly as this thing nosedived, he should be able to bring it back up to, just as fast.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, it wasn't that interview that I was thinking about with the Wentz comment. I think the quarterback stuff has become more accepted wisdom now about how you
I think he was at Sloan when he said that. I can't remember though. He's done a lot.
Yeah, but there was another. I think there was a kind of like I think Shale may have written something about the whole Wentz trade, and it went into some of the details. And one of the things that there was the thing he said about Wentz in that article, which was he had his analytics guys look at it, and because of the fact that he was such a unique, weird prospect, coming from FCS background, that they didn't know enough to rule him out. And I thought that was kind of a weird way.
I do remember
way
this.
of framing making the decision. Like he was he was such an unknown that we couldn't say we shouldn't take him. So then we took him, and I was like, that sounded a little bit fishy. But so going beyond that, I think it's important that you mentioned ownership, because that's the third and probably the most important of the triumvirate at the top of these teams. And I also think it's the least understood or maybe thought about on by the fans, although in Philadelphia it's a bigger issue than in most. So a couple different things I was thinking of. One, we've gone in the NFL more towards this, maybe not more towards, but there's been a rebirth of head coach is king in a lot of places. And then the GM is there, but it's kind of like to supplement what the head coach is doing. I think maybe what's happening in San Francisco with Shanahan, that's the case. I think Matt Rule is gonna do that in Carolina. I think Ron Rivera is essentially doing that in Washington. And you're going to see that in some other places. I mean, Stefanski, not quite as much, but I think in the rank ordering, I think he coming in before Barry, and Barry not being this dominant force also at that position matters there. So it seems to be reversed here in Philadelphia, right? Roseman has a relationship, has the ear of Jeffrey Lurie more than most. Can that work for more than a few seasons? I mean, is it always going to be the case that this is going to happen if you have this model? Because there's going to be turbulence, and when there's turbulence, there's not going to be alignment. I wonder if it's more difficult to have the alignment if the head coach is not at least the putative leader of in this alignment.
Yeah, I'll answer your question with a question. How many humble NFL coaches are there? Because that's kind of what we're looking at. Yeah. Like,
and then they win, right? And winning
is not
going
to.
It's not. I mean, think about Doug Pederson, right? Like his pedigree was nothing. I mean, barely anything. I worked for Andy Reid for a while, right? He wasn't the first choice necessarily. He was mocked. He was mocked.
When you look at Chip, right? Chip was, this guy's a future NFL head coach, and the Eagles were like, he's an NFL head coach now. Like that was an aggressive hire. Both Chip and Doug were relatively inexperienced, considered to be, budding offensive minds. They're going to be on a track to be a head coach. And the Eagles try to leapfrog that track. That's probably the angle they're going to take again. And they are going to, claim it's because it's aggressive and they're finding their next McVay and he's going to be the head coach forever. But the reality is, and this is a lot of what we've talked about, if you're a really attractive head coaching candidate with multiple hires, you're not taking the Eagles job. This is a bad looking job. I mean, you're going to need to hire somebody who this is a bit of a step for them. This is a big career opportunity for them. Like Pederson is better off for having taken the Eagles job and subsequently losing it, the fastest head coach to ever lose a job after winning a Super Bowl ever, than he would have been if he just kind of hung around as the Chiefs offensive coordinator, potentially. It's a tough argument to make, but it was a big career move for him, and it establishes him now in the head coaching conversation moving forward. And so, I like to go back to Graham Harrell, who's he's the passing game coordinator, he's the offensive coordinator for USC, air raid background. The Eagles wanted to interview him as the offensive coordinator last year. And they said they interviewed him, and they said that he just wasn't going to be a candidate for the job because he wanted to call plays. But there's sources that say that he never even interviewed. He just flat out, no, thank you. He's got 4 years of coordinating experience at college. They're asking you to be an NFL head coach or NFL offensive coordinator. This is huge for you professionally. And he took a look at Philadelphia and he said, I'm going to wait. I'm going to pick a different spot to potentially make my rise. And I think that indicates how coaching circles have started to view Roseman and the health of the Eagles job. So I think it's a very important point, which is to say, how long is a coach going to want to sit there and take what the Eagles are offering in terms of the amount of power and control that you have and the amount of influence you have over the owner? Pederson won a Super Bowl. And once things started to get bad, they crumbled. They went bad fast. So you don't even win a Super Bowl. How many years are you going to last dealing with this? So it's a very good point. The organizational health of Philadelphia is in question. And that makes it scary anytime you're adding a new hire, whether that's assistant wide receivers coach or head coach.
Okay, here's something that came to me. Thinking about the Lurie Roseman relationship. Has he like worked his magic? Has he hit him with so much of this mumbo jumbo process, analytics, everything else? Because there's certain owners are going to react to certain things, right? Some owners like Jimmy Haslam maybe react to everything, where he's like, "Oh, Dorsey, look at this guy. He's so he's so virile and like masculine or something. Like I love this scout guy. So he goes him, and then he's like, oh, but DePodesta, like I love this process sort of thing. So
Sure.
is Lurie just like bought so far into the Roseman Kool-Aid? Although I believe in a lot of this stuff, so maybe I'm
Me
also
too,
compromised.
you know? Like,
I'm also compromised. Is that part of it, that he just sees things through the? Because I think sometimes we look at these big organizations, it's $1 billion organization, right? We figure there should be, the best possible people in this position, the best possible head coaches, the best possible GMs, the most coveted jobs ever. But sometimes this just comes down to the owner believes in someone, and the reasons they may believe in them is not because of a rigorous process, everything else. It's because they have conversations with this person and they're tied in and they have an emotional attachment to them.
Right.
Do you think that's part of it? This Roseman thing. Is he just are they just wedded at this point?
I agree. No, I do think it is. It's an Eagles beat said yesterday after the Lurie meeting, and I cannot remember who it is, and I apologize for that. But he said Lurie loves troves of data. He loves collecting data. He just doesn't know what to do with it. And that's where being paired with somebody like Roseman is so attractive to Lurie, right? Lurie loves to talk about in NFL history. And if you look back at this and, we've made it to the NFC Championship game in 25% of the years I've owned the team. And it's like, all right, you've got information. He doesn't calibrate to it super well. And so when you pair yourself with somebody like Roseman, who's like, I have a process for consuming data and making decisions, that's a very attractive pairing. That Lurie speaks that language, and that's a very like business oriented. Remember, Roseman has never worked anywhere else but Philadelphia. I was hired, sending letters to people. Jerry Reese, ex-general manager, is calling Jeffrey Lurie saying, you might want to give this guy a shot. Like, I know you like this sort of a thing. Like, he'll be a cap guy for you. His business guy to be great. He has never worked anywhere else. He has just climbed the ranks. And it's because he very much interfaces with how Lurie views building a team, managing a business, winning football games. So I do think like the only time Lurie benched Roseman was that one year he gave Chip full control. And the Eagles didn't have a great draft. They didn't have a great season, but it really wasn't that bad. And after just 1 year, it was Chip's gone. And Roseman now even has more control than he did back in 2014, excuse me. They placed him back on top and they lauded, he so much emotional development. He's so much better of a team player. He's so much better of a communicator. And here we are 5 years later, and we're dealing with similar problems. So absolutely, Lurie and Roseman are tethered. And it goes back down to how much Lurie is interested in this data-driven approach to building a team.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so one other thing, when I think of coaches and GMs, I don't have any window into like other GM candidates, how they think. You don't really know anything about these guys. You don't know that much about coaches, I would say, either. But for me, right, I maybe take a view that coaches are, I don't think they're more replaceable than GMs, but I think they're very well trained. There's lots of very well trained coaches out there in the world. There are not many like well-trained GMs, I would say, in the world. Or if they are out there, there's not a track that works in the same sort of way. There's a scouting track, right? So there's a scouting track, and you kind of know, you can say this guy's made a lot of great draft picks, so therefore he'll be a good GM, but you don't really know about the actual stuff that a GM is doing. So is there maybe some value in saying, we can find a coach. Maybe it's not the top head coach. Maybe it's not Arthur Smith. But then who's to say Arthur Smith is going to be, if they didn't get Ryan Tannehill, who says Arthur Smith is going to be any different than any of these other offensive coordinators that right, Mariota, flamed out before and things like that. So, like, how important is it to even be able to get that top head coach?
I agree. Like, I think that so much of the process is occluded from us that we follow the tea leaves as best we can. But like Steven Ruiz for the win just did the publish on like, hey, like if you're a good coordinator, it might not mean jack. You know what I mean? It's obviously better to be a good coordinator than a bad coordinator. Looking at you, Adam Gase. But like it unfortunately isn't as strong of a signal as we'd like for it to be. I think obviously you want to hear that your coach is oriented on players, that he's a good locker room influence, that guys like playing for him and they like giving effort for him. But it's very easy to say that. Sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. You know what I mean? Sometimes you believe it and sometimes you're just taking somebody else's word for it, right? And so it's difficult to find the strong signals. I agree, and a lot of that is pre-hire, right? A lot of that is like in the sense of before that process has gone through, before even the interview, is just what we know about this guy from what he did. But even some of that is post-hire, going back to what we talked about with Pederson. there's a good case to be made that Pederson could have coached a much more successful team over the last few years if circumstances in Philadelphia were different, right? And that's the thing is, it sounds silly to say like, oh, 5 years of a sample size is too small, but like when you're dealing with so many different voices, especially in Philadelphia where things are so collaborative, you're dealing with so many different voices and so many different influences. It's hard to divorce head coach performance from what you want to signal head coach performance, like record or offensive performance, and so it's very tricky. And that's why I think that at the end of the day, you sit back and you look at the history of the league and you say, all right, those 3 back-to-back 7 and 9 Sean Payton seasons probably weren't good. But now with the breadth of information that we have in New Orleans, is probably a good head coach.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I get the analogy a little bit there. Although those offenses were pretty good on those 7 and 9 teams, right?
Right.
So I think that's important.
Yeah. There wasn't a problem, right? That's a good point. Yeah.
So I think that's an important factor when you're assessing the offensive-minded head coach and how they're viewed. Okay, so let's briefly talk about like the path forward before we move on to some other topics here. I mean, this has to be like a rip off the Band-Aid rebuild type of situation is how I see it. So again, I don't know if Pederson would have been good for that because what if he got fired? He would have just got fired after next year potentially, right? Like how do you make it through if you're already like a couple of bad years as a head coach there? So is that how you see it, or do you think there's any chance of a rehabilitated Carson Wentz or moving forward with Jalen Hurts as being an answer for a competitive team who is severely over the cap and aging next season?
I think there's a good chance that Wentz is able to step back to 2019 levels. You know what I mean? Is able to just not be atrocious. Wentz would be acceptable if he just threw the ball away. Like it's some of their very simple ideas that would just, when they added Hurts, they didn't get much better at completing passes. They didn't get much better at throwing the ball down the field. They just got better at not taking back-breaking plays. Their defense wasn't lining up inside their own 40 half the time. Special teams was easier, like simple stuff. And so I do think that you can just kind of bounce back to middling play. And that's obviously not what you want for what you're paying for, but you can get there. And I do think if you make a good hire around Jalen Hurts, we've talked about Lincoln Riley, but just anybody who can work a quarterback run offense successfully, you can get middling play. It's not like the quarterback instability is worrisome, but you can get a short-term solution to that. The problem is that you can't really add anybody in free agency this year. You don't expect to make any big moves in free agency this year. You're going to have to move on from Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, Zach Ertz, Malik Jackson, potentially Derek Barnett. You're going to have to restructure Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox. And if they won't restructure, you might have to move on from them too. You're in such a dire cap situation that you don't anticipate adding talent there, and you need talent at linebacker, at corner, at safety, and at wide receiver. You can only do so much in the draft, and so you don't anticipate being a full roster. So that compounded with your quarterback instability means like the offense could look better, quarterback could improve, certainly. The Eagles don't look like a roster altogether that's going to be complete for at least a cycle in which they can start to get some more money in the coffers, make some acquisitions, and get hopefully a couple of good draft cycles under the belt to bring in some youth.
And is this a real quarterback competition next season, or is the trade Carson Wentz thing, is there any reality to that? Because I'll say that the word from those in the know seems to be, like I said, Wentz is on this other side against Pederson, so this was maybe to appease him a bit or to move forward with him. At the same time, when I've looked at what's gone on, I mean, I presume Roseman was behind drafting Jalen Hurts. I don't know, but I'm going to presume that because why wouldn't you? He talked about this whole missing Russell Wilson in 2012 and everything that happened after that. Doug wasn't quick to go to Hurts this season. He pulled Hurts in that week 17, and I don't have any inside knowledge on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Jalen Hurts faction of the locker room did not appreciate that in particular, because he has this primetime chance to have a victory going into the end of the season, presuming that there's always somewhat of a divide in these locker rooms. So that seemed to be a little bit anti-Hurts of a movement there. In his press conference immediately after that, he says, "Hey, we got to fix Carson Wentz. That's our subject one." It wasn't, it was stronger in that area than maybe it had to be, although maybe it didn't have to. Maybe it had to be that strong. So anyway, are we sure that Wentz is the guy for the remaining faction now there?
Yeah, ask me when they hire a head coach, and then I'll tell you. Like
But can a head coach come in and say, you know what, that guy's shot. I can't do anything with him. Like everyone's going to say that
right,
they can fix him, right? As part of
right,
their
and
pitch.
that's a lot of what we talked about way back in week 13 when Wentz was first getting benched,
A
and
lifetime
Peter,
ago.
yeah, Peterson was still like potentially the head coach. We talked about new head coaches, and we said, listen, if you think about Laurie interviewing the field, X group of head coaches say we can fix Wentz. Y group says we want to move on from Wentz. He's not going to hire a Y candidate. It's dumb. Like he's going to trust an X candidate because that's potentially saving the money that he's already spent and the sunk cost in Carson. And so, yes, like I make the joke. They again, like this whole Lincoln Riley smoke is very confusing, but they're going to try to bring in a guy who makes Wentz work. It is not a coincidence that Peterson was fired and then 15 minutes later, Jeremy Fowler has the report that Wentz is now substantially more likely to stay in Philadelphia. It absolutely was a little bit of a Doug versus Wentz dichotomy. Who's your future? And certainly now there's more of a chance that they hire with the intention of attracting Wentz. And a lot of it has to do with they are going to struggle to trade Wentz unless he plays ball with his contract and potentially moving money around to make it less of a cap hit on them or less of a cap hit on the team that's acquiring him so that it's easier for them to move on from him. And the Chris Mortensen report from week 17 indicated that Wentz might want to play ball with that, but you turn to a new father and you say, how many millions of dollars are you willing to give up to get out of Philadelphia? He might respond with, I'll just take $34 million this year and I'll worry about getting out of Philadelphia next year, and then that would be a very reasonable decision for a guy under contract. So yeah, it's going to be a situation where they listen to offers on Wentz. And if they get a robust market, they're going to try to move things around. I'm not sure that they do. And then I'm not sure that any of the offers they get from what I would anticipate being a rather thin market, I'm not sure any of those offers are strong enough to move them off their spot with, okay, we have a 5%, 15% chance of getting good play out of Wentz. Let's really, go hog wild in 2021, try to get him right. And then if he's not right and we really can't fix him, then in 2022, he's so much easier to cut or so much easier to trade. We'll just worry about it then. That's probably the easiest avenue.
Yeah, I mean, the only scenario that I can see where Wentz becomes likely to be traded is maybe if there's a promotion within the building. I don't know if like Deuce Staley is a real candidate or not, or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Because like is an outside head coach going to want to say, because you have to trade him early, you have to trade him before his guarantee kicks in for 2022. I think, and that is like you got to do that. So you wouldn't be you're not seeing him, you're not interacting with him, you're not in the building, you're not on the field with them. I don't know any coach that's gonna do that. I mean, maybe if they promote it from within, there is someone who could have a reasonable idea of saying, I'm willing to move on, because I can't see a coach from the outside saying, you know what, this mid-second round pick. I'm going to go with that guy.
Right.
Like I'm fine just going with that going forward, not having any real insider knowledge of what's happening there. All right, so let's transition here after our robust Eagles discussion. I want to talk Russell Wilson, because that was the other thing that the nerds were, well, and Seattle Seahawks fans, I'd say generally, were up in arms about. I'm going to test something out here, see if I can actually get the audio here for you. That I clipped the whole Carroll question and answer on this. And if you'll
Wow,
indulge me
bold.
here, I'm gonna play this for you so you can get an idea of exactly the context here of what was going on, because I think a lot of people just saw the running thing, and while I think that was really the gist of it, maybe there's a little bit more to it than some people
Mhm.
think. So
Yeah, Pete, how would you assess Russell's season? Just, all of it from game 1 to game 17 and
Yeah, gosh, he just was just smoking early, with all of we were just on fire. We scored all those points early in the season. They really couldn't slow us down. And it was almost lost that it was just so consistently good. And then as we got down the stretch, it got hard, and the games got hard. We tightened down some to make sure that we kept the games in control, knowing who we were playing against, the style of teams that we were playing. You play the Rams twice, Washington, the Niners, all those teams have, the Giants all have great defenses, and the challenges. They all played very similar style of play, and so that you saw our style of play really got minimized some, that we can't let happen. I will share this with you, that we have to run the ball better, and not even better, we have to run it more, and that's we have to dictate what's going on with the people that we're playing, and that's one of the ways to do that. And I know the fans aren't real jacked about hearing that, but Russ knows it too. You know, we need to be able to knock those guys into the scheme that we want them to throw at, and which was happening more early in the season, and so we took full advantage of it.
All right, so that's the Pete Carroll clip. I think the takeaway of running more is definitely part of it. I thought there was a couple interesting things. So let me look at some of my notes on this. I mean, you heard it all, but I thought the most interesting parts were, number one, he said run more effectively, and then he said maybe not even that, just run more. So he actually said maybe not run more effectively, just run more. There's also this issue of we have to knock them back into the scheme that we want. So it's more, you're reacting to what the defense is doing versus saying, this is what the defense is doing to us. Let's attack it. There seems to be a focus in that direction. So what do you think about those two aspects? That's what jumps out to me. And what's your take on the Carroll situation? And we'll get into the larger Russell Wilson issues as part of this.
Yeah, not surprising for Carroll to, sit there at the end of the season, having just lost a game in which they were very ineffective running the football, especially over the back half, like you said. We know who Pete Carroll is. So it's not like, when he says we got to run the ball more effectively, we got to run it more, it's not super surprising. This has been Carroll's refrain largely for his career as the head coach of Seattle. Obviously, this season we had this transition, right? We had this let Russ cook movement that we saw in the first half of the season, and certainly they tried to sustain for as long as possible. They do need to run the ball better when they're handing the football off. Like, there's no doubt that as they dealt with offensive line injuries and in, rotating backfield, obviously Carson got banged up again. They weren't able to run the football well, which when the Rams are giving you 5 in the box, which like the Rams, it's not even like 6, like they'll go -1 in the box. When they're giving you such a numerical advantage, you do have to be able to take advantage of that in Seattle. And that's why the Russell Wilson conversation is important, because you could argue that even against neutral boxes, the way that you pass, the way that you get your guys into the concept, the quickness in which you're getting rid of the ball. Think about like Roethlisberger and how their entire passing offense was just basically their running offense because they threw it 3 yards down the field. He threw it in 2 seconds all the time. You could even say, okay, against light boxes, we still like our numbers here on the quick game. We like our numbers on this shallow because they're playing with too high. So we're going to throw this underneath and we're going to get into Juju and Deontay's hands. They're going to run fast. It's not how Seattle throws the football. Right. If you they put their guys in deep concepts, they want to throw the ball down the field. They live and die by Russ's deep ball, which is such a good deep ball. And so they don't really have the necessary yards after catch receivers or quick game passer in Russell Wilson to be able to continue to pass the ball against too high. They don't have a tight end who's going to be able to sit down in the middle of the field against zone coverage and be a regular stick mover. They wanted that in Greg Olsen. They didn't get it. So they don't have that passing game option to make you pay when you're going too high. It's not how they're built. And so their solution to that is running the ball, and they were ineffective there. So you can argue, I think they don't need to be as oriented on running the football as their solution to getting teams in single high. There's other ways to do it, but it's the way Pete Carroll likes to do it. It's the way that he wants to build that team. They draft Damian Lewis. They have Dwayne Brown. Like, they have these road graders. Chris Carson's humongous. He's angry. They signed Carlos Hyde. It's how they want to go about it. And if they were more effective, they have a better chance of beating teams like the Rams, who we know Brandon Staley is very happy to give you 5-yard runs if you want them.
Okay, so then I think the big picture, the most important question here is, you could point to these different aspects. You could say this is what they want to do. This is the personnel they have. This is what Russell Wilson is good at. If you fix if you fix A and B, if you fix the mentality, let's say, or the philosophy, not fix, but if you have a different philosophy, let's say,
sure.
If you have a different personnel, can you do it? Is C
right.
Does C still prevent you from doing that at an effective enough level that it's not worth doing A and B? And it is better to take the approach that Pete Carroll seems to want to take, which is rather than positioning our whole team to defeat something that Russell Wilson is not good at, let's do something which may be inefficient at a higher volume, but opens up what Russell Wilson is good at, because that's what we have to do with Russell Wilson.
Right. It reminds me of Tannehill from the Titans, especially 2019, right? Where like Tannehill just like did not have a deep catchable ball go uncaught. And it was like, hey, hello, the Titans offense is good. It's like, well, yeah, when you're completing every 40-yard pass that you put on accurately, right? And with Tannehill just not being, an ideal like pocket mover, Tannehill's not much to like, oh, here comes some pressure. Like Tannehill likes to hang around in there a little bit. And for Tannehill being a player with acceptable accuracy, but certainly not like a precision passer, it for Arthur Smith and for that offense, it was all right. If we're going to throw a pass, we better be picking up 17 yards with this thing. We don't want to, we can't, with our passer, the way that his strengths are built, be a nickel and dime team. And oh, by the way, we can nickel and dime a little bit with the 230-pound guy in the back for Derrick Henry. And like that's how we're going to get our small gains if you're going to give them to us. So it reminds me of that conversation. Russ has never liked being a quick game passer, wanted to be a quick game passer. So much of you go through his spectacular highlights, it's usually because he was in that pocket and the pocket was clean and there was an open guy and he said, well, I'm just going to run around for another 4 seconds and see if we can open something up that way. And that's difficult to sustain. And it's important because we're talking about Russ. Deshaun takes sacks. It's what he does. He did it when the line was bad, and then they traded for Laramie Tunsil, and they drafted Titus Howard, and they drafted Max Sharp, and guess what? He's still taking sacks. He's taking scrambles. It's how Deshaun likes to play. Patrick Mahomes, remember when Mahomes was a little bit not great in the beginning of the season, and the Chargers game was rough, and everybody was like, he keeps bailing out of the back of the pocket. You can't pass protect for this guy. He's 12 yards back. Joey Bosa is just sprinting to the back of the pocket every single time, so he knows Mahomes is going to bail out of the back. Quarterbacks have tendencies. Quarterbacks have proclivities. They're people playing a very difficult game at a very high level. And there's nobody who's perfectly smooth around all the rough edges. And so with Russ, you're understanding and this is kind of how Schottenheimer builds that offense. If you try to give him quick game, he might take it, but he's going to want to take it on the deep back shoulder fade. And he's going to want to take it on the vertical route to Tyler Lockett. Like that's how he wants to get the ball out of his hands quickly. He wants to do it deep down the sideline. That is his way of playing. Are you going to be able to take a 30-ish year old passer?
Yeah, I think he's 32, but
yeah. Are you going to be able to say to him, change the way you've been playing? It's been great so far. We need it to be better, and we're going to need you to, DK Metcalf, just don't throw it deep to him as much. Freddie Swaim is great. Start throwing more to Freddie Swaim. That's a difficult ask. And so I agree with you. It's going to be very difficult to fully change a Schottenheimer Russ passing game to have more quick underneath options. And I think they tried to do that a little bit with Greg Wilson and with Freddie Swaim. And it just, they weren't able to fully get it done. They weren't able to suss out that aspect of their passing game quickly enough. And without the running game to buttress it, they don't have that stay ahead of the sticks, get to second and manageable, get to third and manageable idea, which Pete Carroll, subscribes to.
Now, okay, so obviously the quick game is a pretty obvious solution. And there are a lot of different reasons why Russ may not be suited for that. I think some QB height arguments are going to start to come into play with him and with Kyler Murray.
Look at how, right as I said, look at where Kyler doesn't throw the ball either. We're talking about not throwing over the middle of the field. That's
yeah. I'm starting to adjust my opinion a little bit on that. I think it was fun when maybe Mayfield coming out was really the part of it, that him coming out, and then Murray was like, stop being a QB has to be tall guy and recognize that they're productive and what they can do in the NFL. You point to people like Russell Wilson and Drew Brees as being a reason for why that's the case. Now, I'm starting to come to the opinion of maybe there's like a threshold. Okay, sure. Maybe obviously it's better to be 6'6" than it is to be 6 foot, but maybe if you're a little bit over 6 feet tall, like a Drew Brees or even a Baker Mayfield, and Baker Mayfield has his pocket issues too. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
Maybe that's a lot different than being 5'10" or being a little bit over 5'10".
Right. Well,
like Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray.
Kimes joke where you can't be 6'7", you can be 6'6". Don't be bigger than that. Right. And the idea of diminishing returns on your mechanics and your release speed. And when Brock Osweiler's got an arm the length of Texas, takes him forever to get the ball out of the pocket and get through his motion. So that, there's probably a sweet spot. And a lot of it also still remains stylistically what you want to do on offense is going to dictate kind of what sort of pass you need to have in terms of their arm and their release and so on and so forth.
And the one other thing that I thought of, okay, let's say there is an issue with his ability or his height with doing some of this middle passing. Is there any solution to this or a partial solution to this, which is let's just take some more chances downfield, even if they have a too high shell and you have DK Metcalf running down the field, maybe just give him some chances to make more plays. If you have Jalen Ramsey shadowing him, maybe just give him some more chances, because I think Russ had a handful of interceptions earlier this year, which was uncharacteristic and was higher than some others. But if you look at the last few seasons, he had a 1% INT rate last year. He had 1.6 the year before, 2, 1.7, 1.5. These are low numbers. I mean, these are fairly low numbers. Maybe they're not Tom Brady type of numbers because they're not amassed on high volume. But think of how low those numbers are for the fact that he is throwing the ball down the field, right? He's not taking a whole bunch of little gimmies. Is he too conservative on top of being too short?
Right.
And maybe those two things go hand in hand. Maybe you don't feel as comfortable if you're too short. I don't know, but that's another thought that I had, is that maybe he's just too conservative.
It's a difficult conversation. We probably going to get into some hot hand fallacy nonsense over here right now. But what you want to tell your quarterback is, if you see it and you like it, take it. And if you see it and you don't like it, don't, because you want him throwing that ball at a high percentage, because so much of deep passing successfully, at least when we talk about it anecdotally in terms of like QB coaching and approach, is about trust and confidence. And so you don't want your quarterback seeing too high and hearing in the back of his head, oh, but I've got to take this shot. Like, this is how we move the ball. This is how we win. And with Wilson's movement ability and his legs as well, there will always be a conflicting voice in his head that says, just get outside of the pocket. You can go pick up 12 yards scrambling, or just gets out of the pocket. DK is going to break off. Lockett's going to turn around. We're going to throw this thing 55 yards down the field. We're just going to do it later than we thought. There's always going to be, you want him triggering on that we're talking about that quick deep pattern, right? That, like, I've got single high, it's Ramsey versus Metcalf. I want the matchup go. That idea of deep passing, you want him feeling like Steph. You want him feeling confident. You want him in the sense of, if you've got it, trigger, go. And I will always support you and say that's a high percentage decision, even though it's a 3-point shot, even though it's a deep pass, which isn't completed as much. You want him taking that throw with confidence. You want him taking that throw with guts. Whereas if you try to prescribe him to do it even against looks he doesn't like, I think you're going to start to lose that confidence that you need to, I think, be a successful and aggressive deep downfield passer. So certainly, like, Russ's best strength is deep passing. Deep passing is so valuable in the league. Why doesn't he just do it forever? I'm with you. Like, yeah, just let's chuck it. Listen, it's either going to be a 3 and out. We're going to score in 3 plays. This is let's live on the edge, baby. There's certainly, you're going to have to calibrate to his aggressiveness and to find that, but you do not want to put your quarterback in a spot where he feels like he can't trust his eyes when he's making decisions. You do want him making decisions confidently on the football field. Otherwise, you Wentz him. You know what I mean? That's where Wentz ended up, where he just didn't trust anything he was seeing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, because I think, like, even the passes he's completing, the deep passes, they're extremely difficult. They're sidelined, which makes them more difficult. But I wouldn't necessarily classify them as risky.
Sure.
As far as throwing an interception, they're rarely there's rarely something you would classify as a 50-50 ball. It's more like it's either going to be incomplete or it's going to be caught. It's just really, really difficult to complete, and he's better than anyone.
Russ's accuracy. We like, I know when you guys do your QB annual, when I do my quarterback charting, we talk about catchable, but we also talk about placement relative to coverage. And like, I always think about that Lockett touchdown against the Cardinals in primetime this year, where, like, that was just a ridiculous decision. Like, how dare he choose to throw that? But he ends up putting it where only Lockett can get it, even though it's 55 yards down the field. And that's what makes Russ, as I say, the best deep ball thrower in the league. It's that he can put that ball in a spot where it's all right. If Metcalf's running at full speed, maybe he gets to this, but I can promise you the safety's not. And that's where we're able to make more of these aggressive throws downfield, because Russ has that ability to protect that ball from coverage.
All right, let's pivot to some of the divisional round stuff. I know we've been talking for a while here, so we'll maybe hit on a couple of these that I think are the most interesting ones. I think Ravens-Bills is probably my favorite game.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, not only the quarterback stuff, obviously you got Allen, you got Lamar Jackson. I think the matchups are really interesting. The defense, the Bills defense versus Lamar Jackson and what they're doing there. Now, I don't study this stuff as much as you do, so I'm looking for your insight a little bit on this, because my background just looking at this matchup, last year when Lamar was in his MVP season, he struggled in a few games. One of the worst games he had was the game in Buffalo. Dean Pease, who was the defensive coordinator of the Titans, specifically said he watched that game. He watched what Leslie Frazier and McDermott schemed up on that game and tried to do it. Basically, he said, "I want to replicate that in the playoffs," and that's what and that's what he did. So you have that. This Bills defense this year, I don't think they're as solid as they were last year.
Right.
They had a lot of like turnover stuff going on. They started to be more of a turnover type of team. So I'm not quite sure they're there. So there's that side of the ball. And then the other side of the ball, Josh Allen, the book on him last year was, or in years before was, he's not accurate. So you can kind of man up these guys. You can bring pressure and he's gonna fold. He's not gonna play well. He's gonna overthrow the deep passes that you may leave open to them. Now he's just the opposite. He's just like the opposite passer. And obviously that's what the Ravens like to do. They like to blitz. They like to play man coverage at least more than a lot of other teams. So what are your thoughts going into this on what are these teams going to do? Are the Bills going to do what we think they're going to do and just play forward there? And are the Ravens going to do what they do, or are they going to have to do something different?
Yeah, the biggest change that you've gotten in the Ravens offense since probably that last matchup, and then obviously throughout this season, was the transition in how they get their running game going, where they said, listen, we don't have the same interior offensive line that we did. We're not going to be able to zone block as successfully. So we're going to run gap counter ideas. And that's working very well for them because of their size up front. But you also are it's a little bit easier to key on tendency and a little bit easier to figure out where you're going to go with it. And it's going to require that Lamar pulls the ball more and is more successful running. We saw that against the Titans, right? Like,
he was very willing to pull the ball last week. It was almost like, it's almost like don't hurt yourself, but yeah.
Yeah. And so much of how they beat the Titans was we were able to rip off these explosive Lamar runs, right? And so it's not as good of a running game as they had the last season. What they've been able to try and do, as you've seen over the last few weeks, is Marquise Brown's target share has jumped. They've run him on some more shorter routes as they're trying to solve their drop back passing game problems, which is, a Greg Roman offense, and that's what they struggle with. Buffalo last year had Tre'Davious White, and last year Tre'Davious White versus Marquise Brown was such a huge advantage to Tre'Davious, right? He was playing the second best corner in the league. Marquise was struggling. Marquise is playing probably a lower weight last year. That was big because it let Buffalo, like you're talking about with facing Josh Allen, just sit in man. Boom, we're done. This year, with the way Brown's been playing a little bit better and White's been playing worse, if they're going to try to sit in man, which they're going to want to do because they're going to want to bring Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer down because you want your safeties in run support, being able to run the alleys quickly against Baltimore's running game. Trey White against Marquise Brown becomes the most important matchup. Like I said, Marquise Brown's been playing better, but he's still far from what they drafted in the first round. This is a big ask for him. He needs to win this matchup. He needs to win it down the field, which Trey White is not the fastest corner on the face of the planet, and he needs to win at the line of scrimmage. Trey White is so good at the line, and Marquise Brown's been struggling with his releases. So you're talking about numbers in the box. You're absolutely going to be talking about your classic Mike Zimmer background with Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott. They're going to bring those blitzes like we talked about with DNPs. They're going to have their linebackers play fast to flow. Tremaine Evans is a really great linebacker to match up against Lamar. Safeties are going to be down. You have to be able to take advantage of your one-on-ones. And when Harbaugh and the Ravens got kicked out of the playoffs last year, Harbaugh said, we got to become a better team at deep passing. We have to be able to push the ball deep because safeties are going to come low. We got to be able to get over the top. That to me is the story for this game is it's Marquise Brown versus Trey White. And you can even flip it and say, they're going to leave Marlon Humphrey one-on-one against Stephon Diggs. And boy, that ain't went well against A.J. Brown. Stephon Diggs been playing some good football. And Marlon's even better built for a receiver like Brown because Marlon's so physical. So that was strength against strength. Stephon's quick. Marlon at times will get too aggressive. That one-on-one matchup, like you're talking about, they're going to play man. That's how Baltimore's going to live and die. They played a great game against the Titans. They took away that running game. They're going to need to play man cover against a team where they're not even going to be loading the box to stop the run. They're going to be with two high safeties, but they're going to live in man with Marcus Peters and with Marlon Humphrey with Jimmy Smith against Buffalo, that receiving room and Josh Allen. Ooh, that's a 30-point game in the waiting. So I think your wide receiver corner matchups, Trey White and Marquise Brown, and then Marlon and Stephon Diggs. Whoever takes better advantage is going to take the edge. But this is going to be high scoring.
Yeah, and that's so also with the Bills last year, Lamar, I think he had 11 carries, 9 of them were designed runs, 40 yards. So he had a pretty bad game, even running the ball, let alone throwing the ball. Did you notice anything from the Titans last week on how they played Lamar? And then, of course, they've had a few matchups with him versus how they're playing him versus what was successful last year. Is there a specific counter that the Ravens were able to do well, or is it this phenomenon that you discussed of what we're going to do rather than grind these runs and Lamar continuing to grind these and the running backs grind these runs? We're just going to shake them up. We're going to roll, and we're going to hope if we roll the dice 15 times, twice we're going to get, we're going to roll sevens twice, and we're going to get big plays. And that's what they have to do in this matchup
Right.
also.
Yeah, the Lamar was simply better than the last guy in the Titans box. The Titans had one more than they needed, and Lamar met him in space, and sometimes that guy won, and sometimes he did not. And then you get Lamar in the open field, and that's a dangerous proposition. They're doing good stuff. They had a third down conversion, an explosive Lamar run on a QB wind back, which is a new thing they're bringing in out of the pistol, which is it looks like zone read, and then all of a sudden the running back becomes the lead blocker, and it's like, all right, didn't know you could do that, but that's how that rolls. So they're incorporating new stuff. They're getting aggressive. Like we saw a lot of Marquise Brown touches behind the line of scrimmage. Those are quick looks to the perimeter, constraint plays, we call them in coaching, where if you're going to bring safeties low and you're going to put, 9 guys in run support, I'm going to get my really fast guy, 2-on-2 into the outside. If he makes one dude miss, home run. So certainly their offense is going to be volatile. It is not as good as it was last year. It needs more wide receiver talent. It's not very good at methodically running the ball down the field the way we saw the Ravens do last year. Their offense has to be volatile. The Titans without Dean Pease just aren't as sound in their assignments. They just blow a lot more stuff. They're still trying to be aggressive. They don't blitz as much, but they don't have good pass rushers, so they have to blitz. Every team that plays the Ravens is going to put numbers in the box and ask you to beat them one-on-one. Sometimes that's Lamar beating the last defender in the hole. Sometimes that's Marquise Brown beating a guy in space. That's the Ravens formula right now. With the way the Bills defense is playing, the Ravens will get their chunk gains. They will get their explosives. You can full send on Lamar and just let J.K. Dobbins run hog wild. I wouldn't recommend it. Like Dobbins hasn't been great, but still, they'll be very pleased to take 6-yard gains with J.K. Dobbins. That's how they won last year. They're familiar with that model. So it is, you do your best to stop the base offense. You get Micah Hyde in the hole with Lamar Jackson, and sometimes it's Lamar Jackson, and that's how that goes.
Okay, so who do the Ravens want to be that guy in the hole, and who do the Bills want to be that guy in the hole? Or is it not a question of want? It's just a question of the larger scheme and who happens to be there.
Yeah, they've been getting Lamar more so outside of the tackle box than they did last year, where last year they really liked to get him interior runs. And so you're looking at Teron Johnson, who's the nickel. And then I would imagine probably Hyde's going to play more on the line of scrimmage as well for Buffalo. Teron Johnson and you get Dane Jackson, you get one of their corners. That's going to be your best look. Tremaine Edmonds, I said, is a good guy because he's such a quick trigger and he's so long that he's an explosive first couple of steps. He can get to Lamar in space. He's not a great tackler. And so Tremaine's more going to be about beat him to the spot, make him slow up. Somebody else will finish this job for you. You know what I mean? And it does have to be a little bit of a gang tackling experience against Lamar. So I think if you are the Bills, you're probably hoping that you like your safeties. You like the way that Hyde and Poyer play. That's probably the best matchup that you want. With Jackson and with Brown, you get them outside. Beyond Tre'Davious White, it's not a very good corner room in Buffalo. Those are probably the matchups that you want to take. And then it's foot race time.
Okay, and again, going back to the other side, I think with Allen earlier this season, I mean, he was pretty hot to start the season, although I think he was doing more of these Josh Allen things, like in the Rams game. He had a stretch where, he people talk about this a lot. He got his own personal foul somehow for grabbing a face mask. He fumbled the ball. He threw a bad interception. Last week, for several weeks leading into last week, he didn't really have any of those, or barely any of those. I think in the Cardinals game, he had some weird stuff going on, but then since then, not really. He had the fumble last week, which could have been catastrophic. But again, the way teams have been playing him is they're doing the same thing maybe they're doing Mahomes and doing to others, which is playing back and seeing if he's going to make a mistake. What do you think about Allen? Can the Ravens confuse him into doing something dumb? Because I think that's what they're going to need, because I think it's going to be impossible to stop him from scoring, but you're going to need these offsets, which allow you to score on the other end and these big swings, as opposed to saying we're just going to shut him down.
Yeah. The Ravens can disrupt him the way the Ravens can disrupt any quarterback, right? And when you have a Wink Martindale defense, you're very confident in your corners. You're going to be able to play man cover, and you're going to be able to send heat. And that's how they've been successful. They've been getting better play out of Matt Judon and Yannick Ngakoue as of late as well. So when they do rush with 4, more likely to collapse that pocket. And then when you bring 5 and you bring 6, you're going to be able to open up your free rusher, right? And in that way, you're going to get inaccurate passes. You're going to get quick throws. The problem here is, like, in the past, it was disrupt Allen, and you're more likely to get a bad play than good. This year, it's disrupt Allen, you're more likely to get a good play than a bad one because of how successful he's been. You know, the trust he's got with Cole Beasley is huge for him because he's willing to check down a lot more than he used to be. So that's great stuff. But
all pro Cole
Beasley, slot receiver, Peter King. But even more than that, Allen proved to us when he wasn't playing well that if you disrupted him and you made him make mistakes and he threw picks and he took sacks, he wouldn't care. Like, he had that invulnerability sensation that a lot of franchise quarterbacks do, where you can make a series of bad plays and still come out shooting and still come out being aggressive. He proved that he had that when it was not good. When it's good, like, obviously you're going to have that sort of a sensation. And it's very big for Buffalo. You know, there was that experience that you had. You brought up the Rams game. You even had it in the Colts game a little bit where it was like, oh, Colts feel like they're controlling this thing. And then every time Allen got under center, you were like, but maybe not, because you know how quickly he can score and how much he can create plays even when your defense is playing well. Baltimore's going to be able to get more pressure on Allen, more so than the Colts did. It was the Colts' biggest struggle. The Colts didn't blitz, but Allen's going to know when he's got Stephon Diggs against Marlon Humphrey that if he wants, he can 3-step drop and throw that thing on a quick breaker, throw that thing back shoulder, and that will be available to him. The Ravens give you that, and they want their ones to beat your ones. They want their guys to beat your guys. Because he has that, if they need to become a more quick passing game, if they need to get the ball out of Allen's hands, he's mature enough now that he'll do that versus what I think he was last year. And so this Bills offense to me is a proposition of you beat them by scoring more points than them. You don't really slow them down. You don't really impede them. They don't have Zach Moss. So maybe, you know, the running back drops or the running back quick check downs aren't as easy, and Moss is good at breaking tackles. So that bites into their base offense a little bit, but they're still an Allen-led passing team down the field. So this is a team that you beat them by surviving them and by scoring more points on offense.
It's really I'm just continually shocked by how often
it's amazing that we're here. It's nuts.
I feel like you could substitute in all these things that are being said about the Bills and be talking about like the Kansas City Chiefs or something, and you'd be saying the same exact things, unironically saying these things about the Bills. Okay, so the next game I want to talk about, and maybe I'm not sure how I'm a little bit ambivalent about this one, is the Packers and the Rams. Now, Packers are not overwhelming favorites. The Rams, the quarterback, I don't know what to make of the quarterback issues there. I guess we'll figure out as we get forward on that. But I think on the defensive side of the ball, what they can do against Aaron Rodgers, against Aaron Jones, also in that rushing attack, which has been pretty good. I think Rodgers, I still say that he has a higher potential, in my opinion, to be flustered and contained in a way definitely than Patrick Mahomes, maybe even than Josh Allen. I don't know. That's so weird to say. Because we saw what happened in that Tampa Bay game. If you can really like put it on him and somehow lock him down. Because I don't know if he has like this extraordinary level of escapability and other things that you may need in certain situations. So I think there is a chance that the Rams have in this game, but maybe I'm deluding myself on the fact that everyone is so into this Rams defense.
I know, I as well. I looked at Rams +7 for a very long time, and then I made a responsible decision and took the under. Right. I very fearful of Goff at 75% thumb strength and freezing weather. That scares the living daylights out of me. Now, if you can take this game up with Cam Akers and the way that the Rams run the football, kudos to you. Hats off. Sean McVay is nuts, but I'm not sure even against a Mike Pettit defense, which is very acquiescent against the run. They've been playing better recently. They've been stronger in the interior. Rashawn Gary's playing some good football. You know, they've been better up front. So I'm not sure they'll be able to take that over. And so certainly worried about the Rams offense not being able to hang. It would truly take a Herculean effort from this Rams defense. The Staley defense is, you know, like the Robert Mays article, which was so good for The Athletic, and watching it on film, he talks about being 1/1 in the running game and 2/1 in the passing game. I just want to be smarter with my numbers. I'd rather give up a 5-yard run than a 50-yard pass. And it's great. What they want to do is they want to take away crossers. This is a very much so this Shanahan, McVay, LaFleur offense is here to send my guys one way and then hit them the other direction. And that's very much how the Packers have been successful with their boot action game. It's been largely predicated on getting guys moving across the formation. When you have Allen Lazard, who can realistically line up looking like a tight end, block for 10 reps, and then all of a sudden run a deep crosser. Same thing with Robert Tonyan, who's technically a wide receiver. They call him a tight end, but he's built the same way. Those guys are devastating. And Adams isolated on the backside. If you want to try to play man coverage with this, we're just going to take advantage of that one-on-one. The Rams are very nicely built to handle this. I really think that the Rams, this defense is built to to cut crossers, built to poach crossers. So you're going to get John Johnson coming down into Rodgers' windows. You're going to get Jordan Fuller coming down into Rodgers' windows. That's going to piss him off because he's going to have to turn his back to the defense. He's going to turn around. He's going to expect it to be there. There's going to be a safety sitting there, and all of a sudden there's going to be an unblocked edge defender coming his way. That is not a good formula for successful quarterbacking. They have Ramsey that can live on Adams. I don't think that matchup's going to go great for Ramsey, but it's going to go better than most corners dealing with Davante Adams one-on-one. They're very nicely set up for that. So this is Aaron Jones. This is with no David Bakhtiari. Can you dominate up front? Aaron Donald, Sebastian Joseph Day, Leonard Floyd, these guys have been playing really good ball. Can you push up front to be successful running the ball? Because you're not going to get the ease moving the six with the passing game the way you're used to if you're Green Bay. So it's very important that they run the ball well, even with Bakhtiari out. His absence is enormous because Leonard Floyd's been playing great. And so you in the passing game and in the running game potentially very much struggle off that blind side. They're signing Jared Valdir off the Colts roster, playing the playoffs last week, and now he's back. It's crazy where they're at with that offensive line. And so I think it's just going to be very frustrating game for Rodgers. I think it's going to be very low scoring. It's disappointing that Goff and Walford might be so limited at the quarterback position because I'm not sure the Rams are even able to keep pace with the defense playing so well. But I do think this is going to be low scoring. It's going to be ugly. I got faith in that Rams defense.
Yeah, I'm interested in the Ramsey Adams matchup because Adams is a very different receiver than like a DK Metcalf, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, I'm not sure of this, but I think who Jalen Ramsey is, I think it's a better from his perspective to be like against a DK Metcalf type in some sort of ways because he can play strength against strength. He feels good like playing the ball once it's in the air and being able to make a play and to be strong and to go down there. Davante, his average depth of target is like 9 yards or something like that versus someone like DK where it's probably 15 yards. He's playing underneath. He's going to use that quickness and stuff. So what is Ramsey going to have to do? Is he going to have to jam him? Is that what he's going to have to do? Because I don't know. He's great, obviously, but I don't know how the quick receiver goes against him because it's in some ways it's like putting him against a slot type of receiver in the ways that Adams can maneuver over the field.
Certainly, far be it from me to say Jalen Ramsey isn't a technician because he's very good technically, but absolutely Ramsey's at his best when he's just being an athlete. That's where Ramsey is truly elite. That's where he's in the argument for the best corner in the league. Davante is a technician. Davante is purely I'm going to know everything you want to do, and I'm going to break you down piece by piece, step by step. He's an extremely cerebral player. So yes, if they put Ramsey off, which is what they do against receivers like Metcalf that you bring up, Adams is going to have free access underneath, and Rodgers will take that 99 times out of 100. A 6-yard slant to Davante Adams is a dream for this offense. Absolutely, they'll take that. They're very smart. They're very economical in their approach. So you're going to eventually have to bring Ramsey onto the line of scrimmage. And when you do that, it's going to be a battle in that first second of how Adams is able to release against Ramsey. And that's going to be truly like just film guy erotica. Like that's just like, my goodness, it's going to be so exciting. We can't wait. Adams is going to get his. He's going to win his. And what's important with Ramsey, who's such a good corner, who's played so well this year, is accepting the reality of playing cornerback, which is sometimes you lose. Sometimes you don't know the route, and that guy's good, and that quarterback's good, and that's just the way that goes. So you're going to see Adams is so good on the back shoulder. Ramsey's going to have him blanketed, and all of a sudden it's going to be a catch over the top of his head for 20. And that's the nature of playing corner. If you start getting aggressive, if you start getting impatient, if you start getting frustrated, then you start lunging at Adams' little fake release moves, and all of a sudden it's not 20, it's 50, and it's a score. And that's where you really surrender. And so the important thing is to stay measured. When Adams beats you, it's because Adams beats you. And that's the sort of season that he's playing this year. But absolutely, they have to bring him onto the line of scrimmage, and Ramsey has to be able to stay patient. And that is not the way he wants to play football. And so if you can get high volume on Adams early, get him in quick routes early, start to get Ramsey pissed off, a lot of football is a mental game. And that's going to be how you want that matchup to go if you're Green Bay. For the Rams, if Ramsey can't lock up Adams, nobody's beating the Packers if you don't have a solution for Adams, and this is the Rams' solution. So they have to live and die by that matchup.
Yeah, it'll be great to see. Yeah, I have a feeling Ramsey's Jalen's just gonna think this guy can't beat me over the top. So so it'll be interesting to see how that matchup plays out. All right, so let's hit these other couple of games. Now I want to hit Tampa Bay and New Orleans first. I think it's interesting. I have this feeling that Tampa Bay has been this very high end team, although they fluctuated a bit. But if you go back to the last time these two teams met, it was a complete utter destruction. So who what should we be looking for in that? Was that an aberration what we saw there? Was that poor game planning? Most people seem to say that it was poor game planning on the part of the Bucs
Right.
defense to sit back and to let sit back in zone and let them dictate things. I tend to always push back against those things because I just think, how could a coach be that? Like, how could they be? They're not dumb, right? I mean, so how could they be that
argument?
wrong?
Always fun in the NFL. Always dangerous.
So what do you think about this matchup? Because I felt like if that matchup never happened, if that destruction never happened, most people might be saying they think the Bucs are going to win. Maybe people are still saying the Bucs are going to win this game. But at least our friends in the desert still see New Orleans as being a 3-point favorite at home, of course.
Yeah, and when you play that, we're going to spot drop, we're going to keep stuff in front of us, we're going to step up and tackle. What you're saying is, we don't think your red zone offense is very good. So we don't care if you get inside the 15. We're just going to stop you once you get there. And if you score 3, we're going to score 7. And that's how we intend on winning this game, which isn't a very sexy approach. But when you're dealing with an offense like the Michael Thomas-less Drew Brees Saints offense, it's a pretty sound argument. Like if you can stop the run, which the Bucs feel confident that they can, even without Vita Vea, then that team struggles in the red zone throwing the football. And so that approach, I agree with you. There was some logic behind it. I don't think it would have been my call, but there was. I don't think they're going to do it again because it's pretty clear how that went. I don't think you can trot out with the same stuff. So yeah, you're going to see a more aggressive approach. You're going to see more fire zone, which is what we know Todd Bowles for, which is sending that 5th, sending that 6th man, running 3 deep, 3 under, running 3 under, 2 deep, and hoping that you can get to Brees quickly enough to force him to make underneath throws, and then you step up and rally and tackle. You're anticipating losing route progressions deep, but you think that you're going to be able to get to him fast enough. The Saints don't have as good of an interior offensive line as they've had in years past, so that interior rush is critical. Devin White and Levante David have both very high sack numbers this year, very successful blitzers this year. Both of those guys are going to get sent. You have to send Devin White because all game long, Brees said, all right, where's 45? All right, we're going to throw it at 45 because Devin White's just not comfortable in zone coverage, which is a big part of him coming out of LSU and now in the league. And so you're going to send those linebackers. You're going to trust your deep safety room to be able to come up and play underneath, make good tackles. And that's how you're going to have to play that passing game. It's going to be risk reward. It's going to be double-edged sword. But when you're able to get to Brees, he's not escapable and he does not have the arm to push a deep throw when he's under pressure. Like, he's not an off-platform thrower, right? Brees needs all of his legs. He needs all of his footwork in order to get the ball down the field. So that's going to have to be how you approach it on defense. The bigger concern, because they're not going to spot drop again, is you scored 3 points against this defense, man. Like this Arians passing game just wants to go vertical, and they want Gronk to beat Demario Davis, and they want Mike Evans to beat Marshawn Lattimore, and Chris Godwin, who apparently can't catch football because he doesn't have a finger right now or something, to beat Janoris Jenkins. If that's how they're gonna be, and we said, all right, Bowles won't do what he did. Arians is gonna do what he did. This is Bruce Arians. He has not flexed for anybody for many years. You got to win those one-on-ones. That you got to tell Mike Evans, hey, you talk a lot of mess about Marshawn Lattimore every year. I'm going to need 120 and a touchdown, please and thank you. Because that performance on offense won't cut it no matter what Todd Bowles does on defense.
Is the Saints defense the best defense in the NFL?
See, this is my thing. Is I really like the Saints defense is just very good. And we're always just like, oh, I wonder how Drew Brees' arm is. They could at any time lock somebody down. Like it's so deep. I forget who was calling the Bears game. I was on not the Nickelodeon broadcast. I wish I was on the Nickelodeon.
It was Romo, right?
Romo. This is such a deep defensive depth chart, he said. And that's what it was when we were looking at rosters in the beginning of the season. You just look at the Saints. This was before we knew Trey Hendrickson was going to have 11 sacks. And it was like, Trey Hendrickson's our third best rusher? This is absurd. This is obnoxious how good this team is. And so, yes, I think that especially over the attrition of a season where your rotation becomes so much more important in week 18 and week 19, week 20, the Saints defense is so well built for the playoffs. I really, really like their defense. So yes, I think that we underappreciate how good this Saints defense is because the offense usually lets them down in the playoffs a little bit.
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit of this kind of like primacy bias of what happened at the beginning of the season. They lost, they had this bad game against Derek Carr. They had some other poor performances. They were getting a ton of penalties, like defensive pass interference, other penalties.
A
Where
Dennis Allen defense over penalized.
so they were still weren't playing well, but they kept on giving up. They were giving up first downs. Basically, they were allowing these drives to extend.
Sure.
So teams that were not particularly efficient on a per play basis were able to grind down the field and get some scores, and everything that's happening on the offensive side. So Drew Brees for a second. I want Drew Brees to do well just because I'm always going to be the person who roots for the guy who plays well in the regular season, and then everyone says that they implode in the playoffs. Now, when it comes to the NBA, I think there's a lot of truth in that because teams really can play differently during the playoffs. They're not trying that hard during a lot of the regular season games. They're playing tighter. It's refereed different, this and that. There shouldn't be that big of a difference between the NFL playoffs and the NFL regular season. I mean, these guys are going gangbusters. They're going all out, all 60 games of the season. What is up with Drew Brees and the playoffs? Are we going to hear that again after this week? Because I'm hoping that we're not going to see this. Or do you think there's really something about him fading off in the playoffs?
Oh, cold weather, small hands. Nah, it's 95%. It's self-perpetuating narrative. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You lose a couple playoff games because you do. Sometimes you lose playoff games. They're usually against good teams. It's late in the season. You're banged up. And then somebody says somewhere that you're bad in the playoffs. And the next time you get to the playoffs, you're thinking in your head, oh man, I'm bad in the playoffs. And then it builds itself, right? And we're very good at that, right? We've been talking for a whole week about Lamar not winning the playoffs. He's played 2 playoff games. One as a rookie and one as the NFL MVP. It's a ridiculous he's 0-2 in the playoffs. It's 2 games, if he had just won 1, he'd be 50% in the playoffs. He'd be one of the best playoff quarterbacks, So that we build our own narratives. I certainly don't think Brees is built to play in January outdoors. Very few quarterbacks are actually built for that, but Brees certainly I think suffers for that a little bit. Obviously the older you are, the more you expect week 18, week 19, week 20 to lean on your body. We already know Brees is going to be playing every game from now on decently banged up. So those things are true, but I do think it's largely just a narrative that eats and feeds on itself.
Yeah, and I guess the last 3 times they lost in the playoffs, they were all in the dome too. So he hasn't even had to have that.
Nickel Roby
that
Coleman,
weather.
man, he's the main perpetrator behind this narrative. Him and that refereeing crew.
All right, now, okay, last game here. Is there a reason to discuss this game? I'll just throw that out there to start before we even start. Do the Browns have a chance? Because I'm dubious. I'm dubious
for 42 minutes. If it's we run every play and we take the play clock down to 1. Baker's playing better, though obviously there's a little bit of that Swiss cheese. And their running game is impressive. If that offensive line is able to be fully healthy, I think certainly you're looking at a very low percentage bet in saying, all right, all of their 15 play drives are going to score 7. Well, all of the Chiefs' 5 play drives are going to score 7 because this secondary cannot hold up. Been the weakest part of this team all season, is currently dealing with injury as well. They got Ronnie Harrison back. Man, if Ronnie Harrison's a relief, Harrison's a fine player, don't get me wrong, but if this is salvation, we got trouble. So that safety room is rough. They don't have a corner opposite Denzel Ward that you trust. This secondary is really bad. So they would need to turn in their best running game performance of the year and then win it on time of possession, win it on holding the ball last, win it on overtime, win it on some situational clock management, which probably Stefanski's going to be better at that than Reed is, if we're going to be honest, but that's it's a low probability bet. I'm excited to see how the Browns do it because it's always fun to watch teams try to stop the Chiefs. I just don't have faith that it's going to go well. And
okay, so the running game, obviously the Browns are going to want to do that. The Chiefs, that's their vulnerability. Okay, so this is what I think about the Chiefs defense. Maybe you have a different opinion here. I feel like the way teams have been able to get back into these games is sometimes with a lot of explosive plays against them. Mm-hmm. Can the Browns even do that? Can the Browns produce explosive plays? You got your top 3 receivers are probably averaging 4.75 40-yard dashes. Maybe you have Donovan Peoples-Jones, where you're talking about a 6th-round rookie now, running down the field. Can they even produce these sort of plays if the Chiefs are able to get heat on them? If they're able to have some obvious passing situations, what's Baker going to be able to do there?
Yeah, and you have a really good solution to heavy crossing pattern, heavy PA, heavy boot in Juan Thornhill and Tyrann Mathieu. It's a good safety duo. The Chiefs' corners are where you'd like to take advantage. You'd love to have number 13 out there right now and be able to say, against Charvarius Ward, against L'Jarius Sneed, Let's go. Earn your big contract. When you don't have him, right, it's Jarvis Landry, who is a good receiver in his own right, but explosiveness is not the way that he makes his money. So I agree with you, right? This is if we want to borrow another Lamar narrative, this is the game where if you get in a hole, I don't know how you get out. And that's why I say, like, you need your 15 play drives to score 7. You can't be walking away with 3. So you need a tremendous red zone performance from Baker, number 1. And number 2, I agree. I think your best bet for explosives is Hooper. Is going to be working that middle of the field on your climb routes, on your post routes. It's going to be against Matthew and Thornhill, which is a good safety duo. You gave Hooper some big money, so you'd like for him to be able to deliver when you need him. Again, it's a thin bet. So I will watch the game. I will enjoy the game. I will not have much faith in a fun outcome as we had on Sunday night.
Yeah, I'm hoping we're going to see some fun trick plays. I think we might see.
Sure. That's a bet. That's a very good bet. They don't have Odell to throw it, but absolutely. Yeah. That's Stefanski's MO for making explosive. That's a great point.
Yeah, Jarvis may get into the throwing action there. He's been a pretty damn good thrower of the ball over there. So, all right, well, thank you, Benjamin, so much for joining me. Follow him on Twitter at Benjamin Solak. Everyone listening in, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully we have a great division round. This is normally the best weekend of the year, and I think last weekend was good for a little bit, and it had potential to be even better with all those different games, but it disappointed a little bit. But we're getting all the matchups I think we want this week. So I appreciate everyone tuning in. Rate, review, and go and follow Benjamin and check out all his stuff because he's one of the best follows on Twitter. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Kevin.